Okay, we're ready to take questions on the Teterboro taxiway. Anybody? Look, the board unanimously approved the phase one of the modernization of LaGuardia today. The selection of a preferred proposer after what I think was, as the chairman said, a very robust competitive RFP process that went on about 2 years. I think procurement staff, law staff, aviation, engineering, and everybody involved, the CFO's office has done an extraordinary job, really an extraordinary effort in making sure this was an honest and robust procurement, which I think it was. The other two matters with respect to LaGuardia that the board voted on were the authorization of staff to negotiate a limited change order, was the term, with respect to the new central entry portal at LaGuardia, which will link terminals B and C for the first time. That's not to exceed $200 million. We'll be coming back to the board. Sorry, $400 million. Thank you, Chairman. $400 million. We'll be coming back to the board on a number of occasions for future board approvals consistent with the Port Authority capital plan. And lastly, design and bid fees with respect to the two firms that were unsuccessful. And with that, the major step in the modernization of LaGuardia. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. Yes, please.
That Wire and Info Americas.
Yes.
Can you describe the financial structure of the money that you guys are putting up? Are you going? You mentioned some bond debt. Is that going to be TIFIA?
No TIFIA on this. And probably all we have to do is why don't we have a discussion offline, because that may not be of interest to many of the general interest reporters in here. The developer is going to put up $200 million. There'll be about $2 billion of debt. Important to note. That debt is not an obligation of the Port Authority. The Port Authority is not an obligor. It'll be issued through Empire State Development as the conduit, but it'll be special purpose debt. The Port Authority will also contribute, subject to FAA approval, about $1.5 billion in passenger facility charges. If you want more detail, we can talk offline after this press event. Yes,
yeah,
Martin.
You said that the private group is contributing $2 billion, so I...
$200 million of equity.
Oh, $200 million of equity.
Yeah.
The press release, it says that they're, the private sector contributing more than $2 billion. So
Yeah, the special purpose entity they're going to set up will borrow $2 billion. And they've gotten investment grade indications from the rating agencies already.
What's backing the bond that they're issuing? We're just revenue from the...
Yeah, revenue from the 20th largest and one of the busiest airports in the country in New York City. And as I said, they've reached out to the rating agencies. They're working with Citi and Wells Fargo. And we have every confidence that the transaction will be able to be financed. Andrew.
So how can you justify spending about $500 million or nearly $500 million on a central entry portal at a time when transportation...
No, stop. We're not, right? The LaGuardia, the first step of the modernization of LaGuardia, which includes two pieces. One is demolishing in stages the current central terminal building. That's about a $3.6 billion transaction. Included in that is about $500 million of work already underway and a significant amount of infrastructure. The central entry portal, right, which will link B and C, today, as approved by the board, is not to exceed $400 million.
Right, so $400 million up to nearly $500 million. So up to $400 million
Yeah.
essentially a central entry portal at a time when the Port Authority's capital constrained. You all just hosted a Trans-Hudson Regional Summit featuring a lot of transportation agencies in the region that are struggling to find money to finance major transportation projects. Why would spending this much money be a priority?
Well, look, a couple of realities. One is the airports are among the most important facilities we have, both in terms of being gateways to the region in both New York and New Jersey, and job creators, hundreds of thousands of direct and indirect jobs. From a Port Authority point of view, I'll also note that the airports are significant generators of cash flow, so that the $27 billion capital plan that the board approved in February 2014 is largely financed on cash flows from airports, the George Washington Bridge, and frankly, all our facilities. So we think it's a prudent investment. I will note, as was noted throughout the day a number of times, that we will be coming back to the board both on the negotiation with the preferred proposer and with respect to the entry portal a number of times, including begin as early as next month. So the board is going to have a number of opportunities to monitor what's going on, to look at what's going on, assess the effect it has on capital plan, et cetera.
So let me just clarify, the board did not approve today the erection of a central portal. What they authorized was the negotiation by Pat and our staff with the preferred proposer of what such a portal would cost, what the implications of it would be, not to exceed 400 million, what the implications would be on the overall design of the airport. It seemed to us to be a neat idea, worthy of further exploration, costing, consultation with the related partners. It will come back to the board for approval after those negotiations have been.
Right, Andrew, there's one other point I'd add, which is that we expect the portal, because of the retail and food and beverage and other facilities there, to generate its own cash flow and its own return. Yes, sir.
I mean, it seems like you would have to redesign this plan that they're going to have to finish completing in order to get this to happen by early 2016 because of this $400 million project, right? So isn't this delaying it further?
No, I don't think it's delaying it further. First, there's additional design work that has to be done on the existing central terminal building, both in terms of demolishing it and building it and staging its construction. Additional design work has to be done anyway. If you look at the central portal limited to no more than $400 million, it's 10% or there of the total transaction. We don't expect it'll have a significant delay on the
And
transaction.
this negotiating period was always contemplated by the procurement process. There was always going to be a 3 to 4 month negotiating period. It's happening on the same timetable on a parallel basis, so it shouldn't engender any delay.
Are you expecting the final on the editing of this is that the portal, the $400 million includes not only the portal itself, but any ancillary changes that it requires, the roadways or any other activity. So it's an all-in $400 million, and that's separately being negotiated, so we'll know what the total cost of that project is.
You're going to complete negotiations with the preferred provider before we hear the final answer from the design panel, right? So is it understanding that the
No.
design panel's final answer isn't going to otherwise affect?
No, that's not it. The advisory panel will make its final recommendations with respect to LaGuardia this summer.
But aren't you about to negotiate
Yeah,
starting
but
tomorrow?
there's a
with the
long
preferred
period of
provider?
Yeah,
negotiation.
the negotiation is going to go on
How
for.
long is it going to take?
It's
Maybe take a step back. The part of this, and this is, I think, what Chairman Degnan was referring to, it always was contemplated that there was a negotiation process because this was done in somewhat of a vacuum. Now, there's stakeholders that need to be negotiated with. There's the airlines, there's the community, there's figuring out the logistics, and so that's part of the process that I think in your timeline that was 3 to 6 months of
Yeah, exactly, 3 to
process.
6 months. Pat, there's a negotiation that frankly, as I mentioned, the first meeting is going to be held tomorrow morning with the preferred proposer. That's a 35-year lease on a $3.6 billion investment. That's going to take some months to negotiate. Beyond that, there's going to be a separate set of negotiations with the current central terminal building airlines and the preferred proposer that will also have to occur. So 3 to 6 month period is what we've always estimated. Peter?
You have to do me a favor, if you just summarize, what are passengers going to see different when this is done? What is it going to mean for them? And whenever you talk about this, do you have Vice President Biden's third world comment buzzing through your head?
Well, look, I think I have buzzing through my head Vice President Biden's comments, Governor Cuomo's comments, and frankly, the comments and thoughts of millions of passengers of LaGuardia. We survey 10,000 to 15,000 customers at our airports, Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia every year. We've got a very acute sense of what's important to them. No one is happy, including staff at the Port Authority, the Board of Commissioners at the Port Authority, or anybody who uses the facility with LaGuardia or the current central terminal building in particular. So, Peter, to answer your question, they're going to have a much larger facility. They're going to have significantly more retail offerings, 90% of which is going to be after security. And they're going to have an experience like they have in a 21st century airport any place around the country or around the world. That's not something that anybody can say they encounter at LaGuardia today. Martin.
What happens if the perimeter rule is changed in this plan, if we decide to get rid of it? Would that change would you have to change the design or anything, or does it affect the project at all?
Well, look, without getting into the details of the procurement, I can tell you that a communication was sent to both of the bidders raising a number of questions, including that one. The perimeter rule is an issue that the board is going to look at later this year into next year. The board's not made any decision. It's an important, complex issue as to which we've hired outside advisors. We may have to adjust the mid-course, but that is true with respect to any decision the board might make or regulators might make a year or 5 or 10 years down the road. Larry?
Maybe you could quantify for us how much time and how much money will be saved using P3 as opposed to if the Port Authority undertook this entire project?
Well, look, let me give you a couple of factoids that were in the presentation, right? The period to complete the head house will be shortened by about 5 to 6 months compared to what the Port Authority estimated. And the total time of doing the project would also be shortened by 5 to 6 months. 5 to 6 months is not only time, it's money. I'll give you our experience on the Goethals, which is also being done as a public-private partnership. They're vastly different transactions, both important, both complicated. It's our belief that by doing Goethals as a public-private partnership, and for instance, the developers on that transaction came up with a structure in which they're actually building 2 spans. That is going to have a significant reduction in operating costs over 5 and 10 and 30 years. We think that there is a savings on Goethals in the area plus or minus 10% on the cost of construction, plus or minus 10 to 12% on the cost of O&M over a period of years. And we think that the time savings, which I'm not really in a position to quantify right now, but saving half a year on completing the head house and saving half a year is not only dollars saved, but it's also less disruption to airlines and less disruption to millions of people traveling to and from LaGuardia.
We've also got a fixed price contract. The risk of excess costs goes to the developer, not to the Port Authority, and we frankly believe that they can develop it more effectively than we could do on our own.
And I think another point that Pat made during his presentation was that they're going to be responsible for the maintenance. And so here you have a private sector group that needs to ensure that the customer is satisfied and maintains this as a world-class terminal so that that experience is good. And so the hope here is that for 35 years we have a continued heavy investment in the infrastructure.
Andrew?
Are you also looking at a completion date for the central terminal building replacement in the third quarter of 2021? And could you walk us through the decision-making process about not reopening the procurement? Some might see, given all the changes afoot, Martin mentioned the potential lifting of the perimeter rule, there are all these changes from the design panel that is still to take final shape and which you haven't received. Some see it as prudent to...
Well, hang on, let's talk about the advisory panel first, right? One of the advisory panel's recommendations, as I mentioned in the boardroom before, was that the central terminal building ongoing procurement continue, and that further modernization at LaGuardia and JFK, which is a goal of Governor Cuomo, the Port Authority Board, and everybody here, continue under the guidance of a master plan. But the advisory panel pointed out that they were strongly in favor of the ongoing procurement going forward. They did make important changes, the entry portal, the optionality with respect to AirTrain, people mover, et cetera, and we don't think that any of those changes required reopening, and the board's unanimous approval and staff's recommendation, I think, is evidence of that. Peter?
And the completion date question, third quarter of 2021, is the central terminal building still on track for completion on that date?
Well, look, if the negotiation with the bidders goes on a shorter period of time or a longer period of time, it's going to influence that. There are going to be any number of factors. So I think that before publishing a completion date for a lease that hasn't been negotiated, I think what we ought to do is get the lease negotiated. We'll report back. We're going to be reporting to the board in public on a regular basis, and we'll keep you posted on that. Peter?
There's a report out that shows the worst delays in the country are at the 3 Port Authority airports. Why is that, and what, if anything, can the agency do?
Well, look, the Partnership for New York City did a study a number of years ago that indicated that, based on FAA data, 50% of the air traffic control and congestion delays in the country are New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. That's the way the FAA calculates it. That's also because the airspace in New York and New Jersey is the busiest in the country. The reason for the delays that survey, which I guess the Global Gateway folks put out, is just because of the traffic here. It's also, frankly, compounded by the winters we've had recently. The solution to that is manyfold. The Port Authority has put a number of technologies and investments into place, bank taxiways, metering, et cetera, which have the goal of shaving 20 or 30 or 40 seconds off each flight operation. The long-term solution is one that's been much discussed for many years and frankly will require billions of dollars of federal money, which is the implementation of NextGen across the country. Port Authority's been advocating, Peter, for a long period of time that as the FAA proceeds with NextGen and the Congress appropriates money, we put our hand up to volunteer that it ought to be implemented in New York first, precisely because such a high percentage of the country's air traffic congestion delays are here.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
No. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir. One more.
On the subject of the airport workers and their enhanced wages and benefits package, can you explain kind of what the holdup is and when you expect to actually be able to?
Well, look, as many of the airport workers who spoke today noted, they were grateful for the action already taken by the Port Authority board earlier this year in raising the wage to $1.10. We've hired a consultant, as I noted. I've spoken a number of times about it. It's a matter of great importance to the Port Authority and the board, and we will keep you posted on that going forward. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.